So let's go ahead, and if you see, I've created a project 1 folder here which has nothing right now. I've also opened that project 1 in my IDE over here, and I'll make sure that I am in my project 1 folder here, which doesn't have anything inside right now. So I am in my project 1 folder here, and this is my project 1. And as I mentioned, I'll go ahead and create a new file here. I'll call this text underscore summarizer .py. That's my Python file. So I'll add some code here. But before doing that, let's go ahead and follow our step 1, which is pip install request and Gradio. So this will go ahead and it will quickly install my two libraries. One was for request. Request, again, as I mentioned earlier, is a library for making HTTP request. Example, calling API, downloading web pages. In this particular case, we'll call that API where our DeepSeek is running or Ollama is running. That's why we need that. Next, Gradio is a library for building easy to use web interfaces for machine learning models and applications, and that's why we have that available, and we'll be creating a web interface for this particular project. Our next step is go ahead and write our Python script here. So I'm going to go ahead and write the code here. We'll start with importing the required libraries which we just installed. First one, request. Next one, will import Gradio as GR. So the request, as I mentioned, request is used to send HTTP request to communicate with DeepSeek AI API. Next, our Gradio is used to create a web-based UI for summarization function, and you'll be looking at it soon. So next is defining the API endpoint. So I'm going to create the DeepSeek API endpoint which is running on Ollama. So Ollama URL HTTP localhost on port 11434/API/generate. Now if you have not seen the previous video and you directly jumped here, I would recommend you to see that first to know how we created this. So again, this is the Ollama URL which stores the API endpoint where the DeepSeek AI model is running locally, and the API listens on port 11434, which is default for Ollama. Our next step is to define the summarization function. So I'm going to create a summarization function like before. We'll say summarize text, and it will take text as an parameter which it will have to summarize. The function will send this text to DeepSeek AI API and return the AI generated summary. So I'm going to say here uses DeepSeek AI to summarize a given text, kind of like a comment for me to know what this function does in future. Next, I'm going to go ahead and prepare the API request payload. For the payload, I'll be using model, which is DeepSeek R1. This specifies which AI model to use. In our case, is DeepSeek R1. If you want to change this to some other model that Ollama supports, you can run that too. Next is our prompt, where I'm saying summarize the following text, and I pass the text here. This kind of the prompt defines the instruction DeepSeek AI should follow, which in our case is summarize. Next, I'm going to say stream equal to false. Now this tells the API to return the full response at once rather than streaming it in chunks. So that's what this does. If you say stream equal to true, it will give you in chunks. That's not what we want, so we are setting up stream is false. Next step is let's go ahead and make that API request. So I'm going to say request.post, which sends an HTTP post request to Ollama URL with the payload, which is this payload here as JSON here. The API processes the input and generates a response and assigns it to this response variable. Next step is process the API response. Again, we're going to check if 200 okay, that's the request status code. Extract and return the AI generated summary. So for that, I'll say return response.json get. If the response is available in that response, I'll get the response which is in the key, or I'll say no summary generated if there was nothing returned back. So this is the default text if nothing is coming back inside response. Next, I'm gonna say if there's an error, so else return error response text. So this will return back the error message to whoever called this function. Now let's go ahead and run a test case here. I'm going to say test summarization if name __ name equal to __ main. I'm going to say sample text is empty. I mean, this here above ensures the script only runs the test cases if executed directly, not when imported as a module. So that's why this is important here. So I'm going to go ahead and say sample text I'm going to enter some text here. Artificial intelligence is transforming industries across the world. AI models like DeepSeek R1 enable businesses to automate tasks, analyze large data sets, and enhance productivity. With advancements in AI, applications range from virtual assistants to predictive analytics and personalized recommendations. And I'm going to close this sample text variable here. This contains the paragraph about AI which will be summarized. So next, let's go ahead and call the summarization function and print the output. For that, I'm going to first say print summary text, and I'll say print. I'll call the function the summarized text and pass this sample text to it, and it will give me the data back. So I'm going to save this project here, go back here, clear this out, and if you see now I have that text summarization. So I'm going to say Python text_summarizer.py. I'll run that. It will run the project and give me the summary text calling that Ollama URL. Now again, we didn't use Gradio.io, which we'll be using in the next section in a little while. But while it's doing this, or there you go, it gave me the data. Just to go over the summary of what the script does, it connects to DeepSeek AI running on localhost 11434 via request. It formats the text as a summarization prompt and then sends it to the API. It retrieves the AI generated summary and returns it and prints the results right over here when the script is run. So again, this confirms that everything is working fine. If I go back here, if you see the summary is provided right here, it will also show me what it was thinking while it was summarizing based on the text that I've provided, and we have the summary right here. And then here, I'm going to add some code first to create a Gradio interface. I'm going to go ahead and say interface equal to gr.interface. This is how you create it, and it needs bunch of different. So this interface, the web interface, needs 5 different parameters. First is fn equal to summarize text, which function of this particular is to summarize text. Inputs that I'll give is need is gr text box lines equal to 10, and placeholder over there should be enter text to summarize. Next, outputs equal to gr.textbox, another text box on the right side to show me the output of the summarized text. Next, I'm going to say title equal to AI powered text summarizer. Description, I'll say enter a long text and DeepSeek AI will generate a concise summary. I'll close this, and that will create our interface. That's it. So let's go ahead and launch the web app by saying if __name__main app. I launch it by saying interface.launch. I'll save this, and now let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to clear this out. I run it again. Python text summarizer. It's going to run on a particular web domain. There you go. It gave me the URL here. This is where it's running. Open my browser and open this URL, and if you see, I have this text input and output. Now if I make it bigger, it will come next to each other. Again, it's a little bit mobile friendly too. It does help with everything. And if you see, this is our input. As you see, this input text box lines equal to 10, and I have my output which is available right here. Now I can take the same text that I have here and add this here. Make sure that it doesn't have those comment stuff. Let's see. So I have my text added here, and I'm going to say submit. It's going to go and call that API and give me the data back, the summarized text right here. So all the whatever we did in command prompt here earlier, this thing we are doing it through a web interface. Now if I give this to my mom, she probably will be able to understand that, oh, this is an AI powered text summarizer. I need to enter a long text here, and when I submit it, I'll get the data back or summarized text back right here, even though she'll not understand this. But again, this kind of gives you an idea of how we can create a web interface so quickly with a few lines of code, like 6 lines of code. We were able to create a web interface right here. Now instead of summarizing the following text, what I can do is I can change this to, let me just get rid of this and say summarizing the following text in 1 sentence. So I'll get just 1 sentence. Another thing that you can do is if you want a detailed like with bullets and all that stuff, I can change this, and instead of saying 1 sentence, I can say summarize the following text in 3 bullet points. So that's another thing I can do. You can do also multi-document summarization. You can read files. What you can do is, let's say I have a combined underscore text equal to doc1 plus, so I have one doc and I want data from another doc /n/n, and here I'll say plus doc2. So I kind of provide these documents as input parameters, and then I give and I call the summarized text based on this combined text that I have based on different documents. Here you can remove this and say explain this text in simple word. This is more on a casual style. Next thing, if you want to do it more technical, what you can do is you can say generate a technical summary. So this will give me more of a technical summary based on whatever I have provided as input. Again, these are different ways to make your make experience better based on who your users are. So I would say just try those out and let me know how it goes. Create another. Inside my project one itself, I'm going to create app.py. Again, these files are available to you in the resources folder, so you can get them in the video resources. I'm going to kill this here, clear it out, and here first I'll say pip install fast API and UVCon. So these are the ones that help us kind of deploy these apps. So once I have that installed, I already have them installed. Next step is to create this app.py, and here I'll write some code based on what we have learned till now. So first for the fast API, the library that we have installed, let's go ahead and import that. I'm going to say import fast API from the fast API library that we just installed. Next I'm going to say import request, we need that. I create an app called and use the fast API in class, and then call this will create my fast API object here. Then I'll say Ollama URL. This is the URL that I have which will give me kind of in localhost 11434 my models will be available here. Next I'm going to say app.post summarize. So if you call this API in the summarize route, I'm going to say summarize text. This is the function that I need to run, and this is the text that you need to pass. And I'll say payload model DeepSeek R1 prompt summarize whatever text is passed to me, and I'll say stream is false. Next I'll say response equal to request.post Ollama URL JSON payload. This will make the request and get the response, and then finally I'll say return response.json get response if the response is available, or say no summary generated. Now we can run this by saying UVCon app reload. This is how you can run this application. I'm going to copy this, save this file, go here and run this application. Now it's running here. Now this needs a post, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go open Postman, create a new request. If you don't have Postman installed, you can install it. This is just to test APIs. I'm going to write that URL there, and if you remember the route, it's summarize. So I'm going to say summarize, and it's a post request. So because as I mentioned, it's a post at summarize at this URL, and I'll say key. As you see, I need text. I'll say give me a story about something. Actually I said summarize, so it will try to summarize this. So I'm just going to leave it as it is and say send and see how it works. You can give some text here and it will summarize that text. So it's calling that API, which in here kind of making a call to Ollama, and it will give me the response based on what Ollama server is giving back as an API. And you can deploy this on anywhere that you want. But again, you'll also have to make sure that you deploy the actual model which will generate stuff. And again, there you go. It is thinking about it. Okay, it's thought about it, and then I think this is. I'll be happy to create a short story for you. Could you clarify what kind of story would you like? So it summarized it. At the same time, it gave me some text based on it is smart enough to know what I was looking for based on this question that I passed, and it's asking me additional questions related to this context. So I have a project 2 folder for this on my desktop. Here if you see DeepSeek, I have project 2 which is empty. I'm open it in Sublime Text in my IDE, and here we'll create our code. But again, if you're coming here directly and skip previous steps, I'm going to go ahead and show you pip install request and grad.io. So that's what I need, and once it's installed, I'm going to go ahead, clear this, go here inside project 2, I'll create a new file. I'll save this file as text underscore generator.py. So I call my py file, and inside here I'll first start with importing requests. Next step, I'll import Gradio as gr. I'm going to use that a little later. Next, my DeepSeek API URL, same as before. I'm running my Ollama client right now, and that runs on localhost 11434 API generate. That's my generation API for Ollama. Next, I'm going to say create a function, the generate text function, and it takes two different parameters. First is prompt, the prompt that we provide, and next is the word limit of how many words do I want. If user doesn't specify, or whoever calls this function doesn't specify the word limit, I'm setting it default to 100. Next, I'm going to give a comment here saying use this DeepSeek AI to generate text based on the given prompt for this particular function's explanation. You don't have to do this. Next, I'm going to say full prompt equal to generate a response within these many word limit words, and this is the prompt. Next, I'm going to say payload, same as before, model equal to, I'm going to say model that I'm using is DeepSeek R1, prompt is the full prompt that we have here, and then stream equal to false because I don't want the entire thing in a stream. I want everything in one single response. So I'm going to create a response variable, and I'll say request.get, give the URL, this one, to generate prompts, and I'll give the payload which has the prompt inside it as the parameter. Now once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and check if response.statuscode equal to 200. I'll say return response.json.get, check if there is a response parameter inside response. So response gives you key value pairs, and one of them will be response. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to say no content was generated. Else, if there was an error, I'll say return error and pass the response text out. Next step is running the generate text function. So I'm going to go ahead here and say if underscore underscore name underscore underscore equal to underscore underscore main, I'll say prompt equal to write an introduction for an article about the future of AI. That's my prompt. That will be added, sent here. To send here, I'll say first print AI generated content, and I'll say print generate text. I'll call this function and pass this prompt. I'm okay with 100 word limit, so I'm going to leave it as it is. And that's about it. Now to run this script, which is a step 3, I'm going to go open this and I'll say python textgenerator.py. Run it. It's going to take a few seconds. And it's going to call this function, go to Ollama, use DeepSeek R1 as the model, and generate the text and give it to me back here. And there you go. It took a few seconds. It thought about what I wrote right here inside the think tags. And then it says the world has witnessed unprecedented advancement in artificial intelligence over the past decade with technologies ... So it gave me this 100 word limit text that was generated by DeepSeek R1. So there you go. That's our project. Success. DeepSeek AI is now generating text for us. Perfect. Go back to the code, comment this out here, and above here say create Gradio interface. Here I'm going to create the interface again by saying gr.interface, and inside that give the 5 parameters: function equal to generate text, inputs equal to gr.text box, lines equal to 3, placeholder, enter your prompt here. This is like the prompt that we have in let me open DeepSeek. Like when I say start now here, this is the text box that I'm actually creating here. So I'm saying gr.slider 50 500, step equal to 50, label equal to word limit, slider so I can slide along depending on how many words I want, output equal to text, and I'll say title equal to AI powered text generator, and I'll give a description, enter a prompt, select word limit, and generate AI return content. Close this, and then to launch the web app, I'll say if name equal to main, I'll say interface.launch. That's pretty much it. Go back here, clear this out, run the project. It's going to give me a URL. I'm going to copy this, open my Chrome, paste it here, and there you go. We have our prompt here. This is the description that we specified right here, and if you see, the title is AI powered text generator added here, and to the title I have everything available. Output will be here. I'm gonna say tell me about DeepSeek AI, and word limit I can set how many I want. On here it shows right here for 400 characters. So once I say that, 400 words per this particular prompt, and it's going to go call that, and it's processing. If you see here, shows me how many seconds it's going to take to get that data. I'm going to wait for a little while, and there you go. It took some seconds, and then it thought about it, and then gave me kind of description about what DeepSeek is, what all things that it knows about it. It may specifies stuff over here. Perfect. So that kind of worked perfectly. Now this is done here. Next, so first thing that I mentioned was controlling the writing style. So now there's 3 different types. You can have a casual tone, you'll have a professional tone, or you can have a creative tone. So for that, you can go ahead and where do we have here? We had text here, generate a response within these many words. Here, if you want to make it more casual, you can say write a friendly introduction to AI. You can professional by saying explain AI's impact on business in formal tone. For creative, you can say write a sci-fi short story about AI in 2050. So it will try to be creative and give you some answer. Now if you want to add a regenerate button, I already have the Gradio interface here. Inside this I have generate text, inputs equal to, we have this, we have slider. Next I can go ahead and say gr dot button, and this button is regenerate. So this button will make sure that it will regenerate the same data again, or call it again, and then give regenerate the text based on the prompt. Next you can do, as I said, multi-language support. Now to do multi-language support, you can go here inside the prompt, full prompt, and say write a particular language. I can just say, for example, I can say write a whatever language is passed. Let's say language is English by default. I'm setting that as English, but whatever language is passed, I can say dash language text to generate a response within, something like this, and it will use that to show display you data based on that language. So I'm going to get rid of this for now, or actually leave it as it is so you can get idea of how to do this. So that's our, usually what I do is I create a different, I from our project 1 you've seen that we can use fast API for API based text generation, where we can install fast API and UVCon. So I can go here, close this, clear it out, and I can say pip install fast API UVCon. Okay, so that's done. Once that is available, next thing I'm going to go ahead and say create a new file, save it as app.py. That's our project, and then inside here I'll start with importing fast API from fast API. I'll say import request. Now app equal to fast API. This is how you create a fast API. Again, our URL for generation was this one, so I'm going to say Ollama URL http localhost 11434/API/generate. Then I'll say app.post generate. Every time there's an API call, say generate text prompt string word limit int equal to 100. That's our set. Payload model DeepSeek R1. Prompt is generate word limit words for this prompt stream equal to false. It's a response request.post Ollama URL JSON payload, and I'll say return response.json.get response no content generated. Now to run this, I can just use this code UVCon app dash reload. You can go here, run this, and now that is available as in, it says app not found. Oh, I think I forgot to save it. Okay, and as soon as I saved it, it reran it and it worked perfectly fine. So I can take this URL, and now I can go to Postman, create a new request here. I'll say post, and if you remember the URL endpoint is /generate, so go use that here /generate/ and here parameters that I can set here is, I can say prompt is write an introduction on AI, and I can also give word underscore limit is around, let's say 150, and then send. It's going to make that post request. It's going to call this API that is running right now. I can probably see that, yeah, the request came here and it says unprocessable. Oh, I think this was, I just pressed it before. It's actually processing it right now. It's going to call that and give us some data back. And there you go, it took a few seconds. As you can see, 23.27 seconds, 200 OK response status, and I have my data displayed here, and as you can see, it says it was all good and was sent back. So there you go, it worked perfectly fine. I hope you were able to follow along and build this app and the API. If you had any issues or questions, let me know in the messages. I would say go to your command prompt. Again, I'm in the project 3 folder right now, which I've created, which has nothing inside it. And go here and I'll say pip install request and Gradio. Since I've already installed it, it will say requirement already satisfied, all good. So that's good. I'm going to go ahead here and create a new file. This one, I'll call it grammar underscore, or actually not here. Here, save it as grammar underscore checker.py. Perfect. So that's saved. Now here again, our first step is always to import request. Next, we'll go ahead and import Gradio as gr. So we have both our libraries imported here. First, let's go ahead and write the DeepSeek API URL, which is Ollama URL localhost colon 11434 API, and grammar checking comes under generate. So we've seen summarize and generate. Those are the two APIs that we have. This one is generate. Again, I'm going to create a function. I'll say correct grammar and write a document here, a documentation here, or a comment here saying uses DeepSeek API to correct grammar and spelling errors in the given text. Next, I'm going to create the prompt. I'll say correct any spelling and grammar mistakes in the following text and pass the text passed by this function. Next, I'm going to create the payload. Again, model DeepSeek R1, prompt is whatever prompt we've created above, and stream equal to false because we don't want it to stream the data but just to give me the entire response. So next, I'm going to say response equal to request.get. So I'm making a request to this URL and I'm passing the payload that I have. I'll check if the response.status code equal to 200. If everything is good, I know that data is in response. Again, we have did this in project 1 and project 2. If you have not done those before, I'll probably say go there, do that first, and then follow along. If there was no response, I'll say no correction generated. Else, if there's an error, I'll say return response text, whatever the error was. Next, let's go ahead and test the grammar correction. I'm going to say underscore name equal to underscore main sample text. I'll say he don't like to eat apple because they taste sour. Just some random text. I'll say print corrected text and then call the function, our corrected grammar function, and pass the sample text which we have created here. Next, now that it's ready, let's go ahead and I'll say python grammar checker.py, run it, and it's in corrected text. Now it's going to call that API provided by Ollama, this URL, and get me the corrected text back. Now again, the text that we have is he don't like to eat apples because they taste sour. And here you go, it goes around and thinks about it, and it says here's a corrected version of your text with proper grammar. He doesn't like eating apples at all because they taste sour. This correction fixes the spelling of don't to doesn't, uses at all for clarity, and ensures subject verb agreement. So there you go, works perfectly fine. If this is what you got, that's perfect. If not, let me know in the messages. Next step, as usual, I'm going to go ahead and comment this out and use the Gradio interface. So I'll go here, leave some line space, and start here with saying create Gradio interface equal to gr.interface. Now our next 5 parameters, fn equal to correct grammar, inputs equal to gr.textbox, lines equal to 5, placeholder is enter text with grammar or spelling mistakes, output text box label corrected text, title equal to AI powered grammar and spell checker. Description that I want to give is enter text with errors and DeepSeek AI will correct them. Close it. Next, I'll say launch the web app. If name equal to main, I'll say interface.launch. So this will have my application done. So let's go ahead and run this web application. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out, run it, and this will launch a web-based grammar and spell checker where users can input text and get corrected results. I'm going to take this, go to my browser, open this, and here we have AI powered grammar and spell checker, enter the text with errors, and DeepSeek AI will correct them. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my grammar mistaken dog. The dog run fast to catch frisbee, and I'll say submit. It's going to go use that, call Olama and run the DeepSeek AI with the prompt that I passed, and it's gonna tell me here the dog ran fast to catch the frisbee, but he missed it. Perfect. So that's exactly what we were expecting. It fixed the grammar and gave me the output based on what it was thinking here. Perfect. Here, the correct grammar function, I have my prompt. I can change my prompt from correct any grammar spelling and grammar mistakes in the following text to correct any spelling and grammar mistakes in the following text and provide explanations, and use the same things. I have my Olama URL and then call this function. So that's exactly what you can say by saying provide explanation. Now the AI will explain grammar corrections in addition to fixing errors. Say correct any spelling and grammar mistakes in the following dash language. So I can specify here language dash language, just like what we did in the previous project, where I can pass this as a parameter here and ask the DeepSeek AI to fix the grammar mistake in a particular language. So let's say if we pass French here, it will say correct any spelling and grammar mistakes in the following French language text, something like that. Projects 2. So I'm going to go ahead first, close this, clear it out. Again, the libraries that I need is the same two ones. Fast API is what I'm going to use, and UVCon to run the application. I have those. Once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file here. Save this as app.py, and inside this, I'll add the code first to import Fast API from Fast API. Next, import request. I'll create the app Fast API. Olama URL I'll pass again API generate, and next I'll give the endpoint, which is correct endpoint, which requests post, and I'll say the function that runs with this is correct grammar. So payload is model DeepSeek R1 prompt stream response request.get Olama JSON payload. Next I'll say return response.json.get depending on response. If not, I'll say no correction generated. And then to run this API, I can use this, save this here, go back, run it again. So this will run the app, and if there's any changes done, it will reload the app. Perfect. It's running on this. Again, I can use Postman, create a new request, and I'll say this is post, and this was again generate slash, and inside, oh sorry, it was not generate, it was correct, and then here I'll say text, and for the text I can give a text like, let's say she go to market yesterday. Send. It's going to take some time and get me the corrected text right here once it gets from this Olama URL that we have passed. And there you go. Looks like our API is working, and here it says the corrected text is she went to the market yesterday instead of she go to the market yesterday. So perfect, that sounds good. I hope you were able to follow along on my DeepSeek folder, and it's empty as you can see. And here I'm going to first make sure that I have pip install request. If you're using environment, it's good to kind of virtual environments, is good to install these every time. Clear. And now that I have my dependencies, I'm going to go here and create a new file, and this file I'll save it as NER underscore extractor.py. That's my Python file. That's ready. Now here again we'll start with importing request. So I'll say import request, import gradio as gr, DeepSeek API URL is same, and this time also we'll use the API generate. So Olama URL equal to http localhost 11434/API/generate. Next, let's create our function. This will use DeepSeek API to identify named entities, people, organization, location, and dates based on the text that is provided as the parameter here. I'll say prompt equal to extract all named entities person, organization, location and dates from the following text, the text that is passed to us. Next, I'm going to create the payload as before. Model is DeepSeek R1, prompt is prompt and stream is false because I don't want the entire data back in stream, but I want it in one shot. Next, I'm going to say response that I get from this request.post Ollama URL JSON equal to payload. So I pass that and I'll get the response. Now in my response, I'll check if the status code is 200, then I'll say return response.json, convert the response to JSON and get the response key in there if it's available. If not, I'll say no entities detected. Else, I'll say return error and pass the response text. Next, I'm going to say named entity recognition. This is where I'll test it. I'll say name equal to main, then I'll say sample text equal to Google was founded by Larry Page and Sergey Brin in September 1998 at Stanford University. And I'll say print extracted entities and finally call the function extracted name entities with this sample text that I've created here. So that brings us to next step, step 3, which is running the script. I'm going to go here and I'll say Python and our file name is NER extractor. I'll run this. It'll go through, pass the text to this particular function, and this function will pass it along with this and try to get persons, organization, location and dates using the DeepSeek R1 model prompt, and it will not stream. That's why we don't see data here, or else we would see data here. So this will get me the response completely at once, and once I get that response, I will display it here, which it did right now. The named entity extraction from the text are Google, which is organization, Larry Page, which is person, Sergey Brin, which is a person, September 1998 date, and Stanford University, which is an organization again. So there you go. So we have our data here. Success. DeepSeek AI successfully extracted named entities from the text for us. And here we have our function properly written. Only thing that we need is to create the Gradio interface, which we have done in the previous projects. So I'm going to go ahead here and comment this out. And here on this line, start with a comment saying create Gradio interface. Create the interface by saying gr.interface. Function is extract named entities. Inputs equal to gr.textbox. Lines is 5. And I'll say placeholder text is enter text for entity recognition inside my text box. Next, my outputs equal to again another text box, which will show me the extracted entities. Title equal to AI powered named entity recognition NER, and description is enter a paragraph and DeepSeek AI will extract persons, organizations, locations and dates for us. Next, I'm going to go ahead, close this and say launch the web app by saying if name equal to main interface dot launch. So this should launch our application. So let's go ahead and run this by opening this, clear this out, make sure it's saved, run it. I'm gonna say 7860, so I'm gonna go here and I'll say HTTP 7860, was that right? 7860, perfect. I have my AI powered named entity recognition web application created here. I'll add some text here, the Elon Musk text here, and then I'll submit this and I'll wait for it to call the API or call the web URL and get me the data from this. So give it a few seconds and there you go. We have the data back. Person is Elon Musk, organization is Tesla, SpaceX organization, location California, and date is 1971. Perfect. So we have all the data back from that text. Perfect. That brings us to my code, and here instead of this prompt I can say extract persons, organizations, locations, dates and job titles from this text. Instead of what was I saying before, I'm saying named entities, right? So you can specifically say here that I want to get persons, organizations, location, dates and something like this. So I'm going to keep this here, comment it out. The text saying like extract all named entities from the following text which is in French language, or from this following French language text, something like that. French language text, something like that. Color coded entities. So that is something that you can try out. I would give that as a homework for you. So try to see how you can get the data back that is extracted in a color coded for entities. if you don't have, let's close this out. I'll have to install Fast API because that's what I use to make an API, and then UVCon to run it. So UVCon, that's ready. So that's all installed. Once that is installed, go ahead and create a new file. I'll call this as app.py. Save it in the same folder. I think I have too many P's. Rename this, remove one additional P. There you go, perfect. And here again, we'll start from importing Fast API from Fast API, importing request, app equal to Fast API, create the app, give the Ollama URL, HTTP localhost 11434, API generate. Next, we'll create the endpoint, post endpoint, which is extract entities. A function will be extract named entities based on the text that is passed. Payload equal to model DeepSeek R1 prompt extract entities from the text, and stream is false. We get the response back, and then we'll get return the response.json.get response or no entities detected. That will be returned back. Now to run this application, we'll have to call this. So I'm going to go ahead here, call that, and it's ready and running here. Go to Postman, create a new one, open it here, slash, and my URL is this. So I'm going to go here, enter that. It needs text, and the value I'm going to use the same as what we used here. Use that here, and then make sure this is post send. It's going to go to that API, call that API, and get the text back and display it here. I'll give it a few seconds. And there you go, it took a few seconds and we have the data back where it specifies the extracted entities from the given text are Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, California, Pretoria, South Africa. Perfect. So we have the data back. I hope you were able to follow along and get this. If you did not, or if you had any issues, install request and Gradio. So once that is installed, clear this out. Go here, second step, create a new file, save this as sentiment_analysis.py. So that will be saved inside this. That's the file we have. And we will go ahead and start with importing our request and Gradio framework. So import request, import Gradio as gr, our DeepSeek API URL. Again, I'm going to use the generate API, Ollama URL, HTTP localhost 11434 API generate. Next, let's write a function to analyze the sentiment. Here is our comment. Uses DeepSeek AI to classify sentiment as positive, negative, or neutral. Let's give our prompt. I'm going to say classify the sentiment of the following text as positive, negative, or neutral, and pass the text to it. Next, I'm going to give the payload again, DeepSeek R1. Prompt is this prompt, and stream equal to false. Close that. I'll have a response by calling request.post to the Ollama URL and with the JSON or with this payload here. And then I'll check if the response status code is 200. I'll say return response.json.get. If there's a response key, I'll pass that. If not, I'll say no sentiment detected. Else, I will say return error response.text. Next, I'm going to go ahead and test the sentiment analysis. So if name equal to main, sample text equal to the movie was absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed every minute of it. Print sentiment analysis result, call that function and pass the sample text. So save this, go back here, and I'm going to go ahead and say Python sentimentanalysis.py, run this. While this is running and calling that URL, I'm going to go ahead and keep another sentiment. I'm going to go ahead and go here and paste this text that I have. Okay, for the next one, let's make sure that this is run. Okay, it says the sentiment for this text is positive. Comment this out, and I'll say the service was terrible. Let's go ahead, clear this out, and run it again. And this time it says answer is negative. The sentiment in this text is negative. The use of terrible and the issues faced indicate dissatisfaction. So there you go, perfect. So that's our sentiment analysis code here. I hope you were able to follow along and implement this. If not, let me know in the messages if you had any issues. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create a web app for sentiment analysis. Now let's build a Gradio web interface for interactive sentiment classification. We'll follow the two steps. First, we'll modify our sentiment analysis.py file, update the script to add the Gradio interface. Next, we're going to run the web app. So I'm going to go ahead here, comment this part, go scroll down, and here I'll start with a comment saying create Gradio interface equal to gr.interface, and our parameters fn equal to analyze sentiment, input says gr.textbox, lines equal to 3, placeholder is enter a sentence for the sentiment analysis, output is gr.textbox, label sentiment result, title will be AI powered sentiment analysis, description is enter a sentence and DeepSeek AI will classify its sentiment as positive, negative or neutral. Close this, and then let's launch the web app by saying if name equal to main interface.launch. Save this file. Second step, let's go ahead, clear this out, run it, and I'm going to use this URL here. Go to our web browser, open a new tab, paste the URL, and here, there you go, our web application is ready. I'm gonna add this text here just to test it out. I'll copy this, paste it here, and say submit. It's gonna go to the API URL to Ollama and call that generate API, and then it will say this is negative because it says the service was terrible. Next, this one, I'm gonna go here and paste this, submit, and this one was movie was absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed every minute of it. So this is very much positive, so it should go back, and right now it says the sentiment of the text is positive. So perfect. So there you go. So we've created a web application which you can use to test sentiment analysis. Now next step, prompt here, from this to this. I'm going to leave it here. I'm not going to run it. Analyze the sentiment of this text. Provide a sentiment score from -1 very negative to +1 very positive. This will give you a score. Like for example, if we send some text, it will tell you this is 0.85 positive, where it tells you how much confident the AI is in predicting the score. Where you can say classify the sentiment of this text in this language. You can specify language here as positive, negative or neutral, and this language I'm going to set it default to English if you decide to run it directly without changing it. But there you go. So it will say in particular language as positive, negative or neutral, and that can be passed as a parameter wherever you're calling that particular function. So there you go, that's perfect. So we have where you can, so I'll say this, I'll comment this out, identify sentiment in the following text and highlight words that contribute to it. So if you remember what we did here, if you see here the positive and negative, it says absolutely and fantastic indicate high satisfaction. So it will highlight those words in this particular case, make them bold and display it out to you. So that's what you can do. So I'm going to go here, save this file, go back here, kill this, clear it out, and here I can say pip install fast API and UVCon. So those two, fast API is to create an API, and then UVCon is to run the API. And then I'm going to go here, create a new file, save this as app.py, and inside here I'll import first fast API. I'll go here and say from fast API import a fast API. Import the request. I'll create the app, the fast API app, by saying app equal to fast API. Ollama URL, this is the URL for Ollama. I'll pass that. I'll create a post endpoint which is for analyze sentiment, and I'll create a function to run for it. It needs a text as a parameter. Payload is model DeepSeek. Prompt is classify sentiment, and stream is false. Response is request.post Ollama URL JSON payload. Next I'm going to say return responses.json get. If there's a response, give it back or say no sentiment detected. And to run this application, this is what we need. I'll save this, I'll go here and run this, and now it's running on this particular port. Again, I'll open Postman, create a post request, put it here, and our endpoint is analyze sentiment, and I'll pass text here. I am very happy today because it's my vacation day and the weather is pleasant, and I'll send it. It will go to that API, call this API, and soon give me a response back about the sentiment of this text that I passed. It took a few seconds, thought about it, and then told me that there is no negative elements present. So answer is positive because the individual highlights their happiness during a vacation with pleasant weather using constructive adjectives like very happy. So there you go, this is a positive, and that's our API available here at this particular URL which we can use. Perfect. So I hope you were able to follow along and build this API. If you had any